Okay, this is chapter 26, soft tissue injuries. So soft tissue injuries are very, very common. They can be as simple as a cut or a scrape. It can be a serious life-threatening injury. Just make sure that you don't become distracted by those open wounds. You don't want to make that critical mistake of neglecting something that truly is life-saving in lieu of something that is just minor. It just looks really scary. Soft tissues of the body can be injured of various type of ways. Blunt injury, we've already talked about several. That's just an energy exchange between the patient and an object that's more than the tissues underneath can tolerate. A penetrating injury, the object actually breaks through the skin and enters the body. Barotrauma, which is commonly seen in those blast injury victims, refers to a sudden or extreme change in air pressure. And then burns. Burns are also considered a soft tissue injury. So like I said, very common. About 4.1 million emergency department visits were accounted for on average each year. Wound care is one of the most frequently performed procedures in the ER across the United States. Most patients that require intervention require pretty basic intervention. So irrigation, just cleaning it out, dressing, bandaging, maybe some suturing. Most of the time it's not going to be terrible. It looks way worse than it really is. Death that occurs because of a soft tissue injury is often related to either hemorrhage or infection. So not really the cut necessarily itself. Uncontrolled hemorrhage obviously leads to shock when that mechanical barrier is broken, aka the skin. Then all of a sudden now we have pathogens that are able to enter into the body and can cause either a local or a systemic infection. Infection can be pretty mild, but it also can go all the way up to life or limb threatening, especially in sensitive populations. So kids, older adults, people with diabetes or other health conditions that may compromise the immune system. Soft tissue injuries can often be prevented, or at least their complications can be prevented by using simple protective actions. So you want to make sure that smoke alarms are functioning and tested regularly, controlling the temperature of your hot water heater, especially if you've got a little one running around. It's not only about the temperature of the water, but the amount of time that the person is exposed to the water. And so a child actually can get a severe burn at a lower injury and a lower amount of time than an adult can. So a nice hot bath that could be tolerable for an adult can cause pretty extensive burns in a child. And then enforcing building codes to regulate different electrical and construction practices to mitigate risks. The skin is the body's first line of defense against different external forces and infection. It's actually the largest organ in the body. It's relatively tough. It's susceptible to injury. Your skin actually is designed to give way under enough force to protect the muscles and bone structures underneath. But I mean, injuries can really vary. It can be simple bruises and abrasions, which are like the raspberries you get from falling down on the basketball court, to some pretty serious lacerations, amputations, etc. Injuries may expose blood vessels, nerves, and bones depending on how bad it is. In all instances, what we're looking to do is to control bleeding, to prevent further contamination. We're not so worried about cleaning it up ourselves, protecting wounds from further damage, and then applying dressings and bandages. Skin varies in thickness depending on your age and depending on where it's located on your body. The younger you are and the older, like super young to very old, thinner skin is a problem. It hasn't quite fully developed when you're super little. And then as you get very old, and let's say they're using very old, very loose and fast hair. But once you get through that aging process, you start to lose a lot of those underlying structures. You lose what's called collagen, which makes your skin pliable and flexible, but adds strength to it. You lose that, and so you tend to tear a lot easier. Your skin is also thinner on the eyelids, lips, ears. The scalp is relatively thick, but those blood vessels are right there at the surface, so there's not a lot to protect them. On the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet, your skin is significantly thicker. And then on your back, your skin tends to be a little bit thicker as well. Overall, there's two different um, layers to your skin. There's actually more than that, but these are the principal layers. So you've got the epidermis, which is the external layer. This is what we actually see, epi meaning on top of. And then the main layer is that dermis. It's got all the follicles for the hair, sweat glands, sebaceous glands. Sebaceous is just a fancy word for oil. And then the blood vessels also are in the dermis that deal with nutrients and oxygen and waste removal. Here is a picture of all of that. So you can see on top there's the epidermis, which is relatively thin in comparison to that dermis layer. The third layer that they don't talk about, but in just relative terms, we'll call it the hypodermis. So hypo meaning below. That typically is going to have all of your fat. There's a little membrane that actually holds your skin to your muscle there. But yeah, quite a bit of structural component to the skin itself. Your skin covers all of the external surfaces of your body, and then you have all of your bodily openings that are lined with mucous membranes, which is just a different type of skin, essentially. They're moist because of mucus that is created there. And mucus is just that watery substance. It lubricates openings and also provides a protective barrier against bacteria. Your skin tends to feel more dry, but you do secrete sebum, that oil from sebaceous glands, so that your skin stays nice and supple and stays pliable and relatively hydrated. Because if your skin were to get too dry, it would crack, and then it kind of defeats the purpose of having a mechanical barrier because it's not there. So your body maintains at least a little bit of natural lotion on your skin. And then that also does add a little bit of waterproofing as well. So your function, your skin has a lot of them. The big ones, the mechanical barrier, helps regulate body temperature, helps maintain fluid balance, and then has all of your sensory receptors as well. The nerves in your skin allow the brain to have a lot of information about all of your environment, takes in a lot of stimuli as well. Any break in the skin may allow bacteria to enter, which increases the potential for infection, fluid loss, loss of temperature control. Any one of those can cause serious illness and can truly even lead to death. There's three major types of soft tissue injuries. There's closed injuries, so the damage occurs beneath the skin or mucous membrane, and the surface of the skin or mucous membrane remains intact. There's open injuries, so there's a break in either of those barriers, skin or mucous membrane. and then exposes those deeper tissues to contamination, and then burns, which are the result of either heat, uh, frictional heat, and the first one, more like thermal heat, toxic chemicals, electricity, and nuclear radiation as well. So some pathophys. Healing wounds go through several different overlapping stages, and it all is about bringing the body back to homeostasis. First and foremost, cessation of bleeding needs to occur because loss of blood hinders vital nutrients and oxygen getting to the damaged area. It also impairs the tissue's ability to remove waste, which then ends up leading to abnormal function, which then interferes with homeostasis, and our body just doesn't want that. Once we get that blood stopped, the next is inflammation is the next stage. So a lot of cells are going to start moving to that area. You're going to have white blood cells that go in to fight any sort of pathogens. You have lymphocytes that destroy bacteria. You have mast cells, which release histamine. Yes, the same thing that Benadryl combats. It actually releases that to that area. So oftentimes we get itching while we're healing. Normal. Inflammation leads to the removal of foreign material, damaged cell parts, and invading microorganisms, excuse me. So that's definitely something that we need to happen. So inflammation, not always a bad thing. The next thing we do is to replace the area that's damaged by building a new layer of cells. So cells quickly multiply around the edges of the wound in order to plug the hole, essentially. Except in cases of clean incisions, you often have a scar that ends up forming because the new stuff that you, or the reconstructed stuff that you build, is not going to be exactly the same as the stuff that you lost. But even if it does look a little bit different, oftentimes the function is returned. So it still operates the same way, it just doesn't look the same way. And then we have new blood vessels forming in order to bring oxygen and nutrients to that new injured tissue. New capillaries bud from the intact ones that are still around that lie adjacent to that damaged skin. They are a massive channel for oxygen, and then removing waste from that area, since with the damage, it's got to move some stuff out as well. The last stage of wound healing, now all of a sudden we have collagen. Remember that collagen that I said was in our skin that loses its elasticity or goes away after we age enough? Well, the beautiful thing about it is that while we have it, it provides stability to the damaged tissue by pulling the borders of the wound closer and closer together, which thereby helps to close up that open tissue. Collagen is very tough, it's very fibrous, it's a protein, and it's found in scar tissue, hair, bones, and other connective tissues throughout the body. Collagen can't restore the damaged tissue to its original strength, but at least it gives it some strength compared to, still being damaged. We will go on in the next recording.